Mark Shelton. I am the Director of Library Services here at the College of the Holy Cross. I want to welcome all of you to our Author on the Hill book series author talks. I really enjoy these because they give us an opportunity to bring a book to life, an opportunity to delve much more deeply into the content of a book than just what we experience on paper, and of course having the person who actually wrote the book here to give us more insight and detail into what his thoughts were about the book, why he wrote it, some nuance about the book that we may not get by just simply reading the book. So today we are actually videotaping the talk, and we'll actually be putting it up on YouTube so that you can go back and scrutinize every single detail and be able to send him lots of emails about the book in case you might have missed something, got distracted by a cell phone going off or something like that. We also have refreshments, so don't hesitate to take a moment, get yourself a drink if you need it. Also, the book that we will be presenting on today is actually on sale over the bookstore in case you want to pick up a quick copy of your own. So today, our speaker is Professor Predrag Cicovacki. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I made a point to practice a little bit more, just out of respect for you. The professor is a professor of philosophy and the O'Leary Research Fellow here at the College of the Holy Cross. He has been a research fellow at a number of universities across Europe. And of course, his works have also been translated into a number of different languages. Today, we are hearing about his 2015 book, Gandhi's Footprints, which I hope will be an excellent discussion. And I know that at the end of the talk, he will open it up for questions. So thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to your presentation.
Good afternoon. Happy to see you here. I'm going to talk about why I wrote this book. Because that's the book I did not plan to write. I think every author usually has plans, just like students during the semester, they already make plans what they're going to do during the summer break. I think authors plan or working with one book already think about the next one and the next one and the next one. I can easily tell about the next 10 books that I would like to write. I'm not sure I'll be able to. How did it happen that I wrote a book that I didn't plan to? I've known of Gandhi, I've been familiar with Gandhi for many years, at least 25 years. I had to serve in military, mandatory military service when I was still in former Yugoslavia. And I took two books with me to the military camp. One was a book by philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, Uncertainty in the Gewissheit. That's maybe the book that I was thinking about, planning to write a book about one day, but it did not happen, even though I did use it here for teaching the Holy Cross in my early years. And another book that I took with me was Gandhi's autobiography. I admire Gandhi from my childhood, and for at least 10 years, probably 15 or so, I'm teaching Gandhi here every semester or every other semester here in classes at Holy Cross, but I didn't ever feel an urge to write a book about Gandhi. It's one thing to teach about somebody, somebody's life and work, and another to write a book about this in person. The big change happened when I went to India with my wife, who's here in the audience, as a Fulbright Fellow in the fall of 2012. My Fulbright project was to study the history of nonviolence in India, especially the Jain tradition, Jain religious tradition, which is probably the oldest tradition that tried to develop the philosophy of nonviolence, and for whom nonviolence is the central principle of life still today. It was, so to say, stationed at the Maldiya Center for Peace Studies at Banaras Hindu University, Banaras or Varanasi as it's called in India, which may be easily the largest peace center in the world. About 170 graduate students doing their master's and PhD in peace studies. Huge place. And we had an agreement that my Fulbright would be part teaching, part research, and that I would teach a class about nonviolent movements in the world. And yet, the second day when I went over there, they informed me that besides that class, they want me to teach a course on Gandhi. So imagine you go to India and you want to learn about Gandhi, and they ask you to teach about Gandhi because they don't have anybody to teach a course on Gandhi. When you go to India, one of the most important principles is you have to adjust. You have no idea what's going to be thrown at your way. And if you have some preconceived notions about what you're going to do over there, what you're going to see, you have two choices: to leave India as quickly as possible, or to adjust yourself to their reality. So I got all the books I could get on Gandhi, and it was actually good and very educational for me because they were all written by Indian authors that we have never heard. And those books gave me a totally different perspective of Gandhi. It also helped tremendously that I was living in India at the time. And I think Gandhi looks very different from the Western perspective than from the Indian perspective. For instance, that movie that most of you have probably seen on Gandhi is totally made from the Western perspective. Indians don't care about it, and they kind of just shake their heads and say, it was not like that at all. But for the Western point of view, it's good enough. It so happened I was there in India on the 2nd of October, I was asked at another big university to give a lecture on the anniversary of Gandhi's birth. Then I finished that course. They asked me to teach more about Gandhi, and I was reading diligently about Gandhi, trying to read to understand more so that I don't embarrass myself. Then came the anniversary of Gandhi's assassination, the 30th of January. I was asked again to go to another big university to give a lecture on Gandhi. I was even once asked to give a lecture on Gandhi at the high school that has Gandhi's name, that bears Gandhi's name, and yet the principal told me that he more or less hates Gandhi, that he never had any respect for Gandhi, but that he's heard good things about me and he's hoping to learn something about Gandhi, and maybe I will help him realize that Gandhi was not as bad as he thought all his life. It's India. One thing that happened as I was teaching these classes and giving those lectures, I realized that I did learn a lot of things about Gandhi, and that I also can convey them in a way that touches people, even Indians, that illuminates something for them about Gandhi that somehow they were not aware of, or that they did not connect with their own lives, or somehow I was making an impression and I was getting more and more of those invitations to speak, especially about Gandhi. In the month of December, I was there alone. My wife, unfortunately, had to return home, and I started for the first time thinking about maybe writing a book on Gandhi. I had plenty of free time, and I tried to sketch something, and it just didn't look good and didn't look promising at all, and I gave up on the idea. And I continued teaching on Gandhi, and then came back to the United States and still had a few months before the next academic year. And one fine morning in April, I remember it was April, so still plenty of months before the September, I just woke up and something in me just said, write a book on Gandhi. And I went through my notes, there were hundreds of them, hundreds of pages of notes, and all of a sudden, I saw structure. I saw how it could fit. I saw how it could be a message that's interesting to hear and important to deliver. You can know a lot of things about a lot of things, or about one subject, but unless it starts talking to you. You better don't even fool with the idea of writing something about it. That book on Gandhi, more than any other book that I wrote, and there are about 10 of them that I wrote and maybe 8 that I edited, that book forced me to write it rather than me trying to write it. For instance, I'm preparing to write my next big book, and it's going to be big on Tolstoy, and I've been preparing for at least 2 years now, and I'll be on sabbatical next year, and I already have hundreds and hundreds of pages of notes. I think I've read by now everything that Tolstoy wrote. I think I've read pretty much all the secondary literature. I can't wait for the semester to be over to go into it. But this is the book I want to write. The book on Gandhi I didn't plan to write. I didn't want to write. I had no idea of writing this book. And then it just came to me. And the first draft of the book was written in 4 weeks. It came out. I was ready for it. Of course, I have no illusion. The first draft is not the last draft. The second draft took about a good 3.5 months of editing and publishing. So you write it in 4 weeks and then you edit, spend next. Usually, at least my procedure is this. And I write the draft of the book. They're good and kind people like Paul Robb and many others who are willing to read the entire draft or portions of it that they feel more competent to comment on. And so you give it to 5, 6, depends how many friends, people to read, and you get constructive comments that make you think about it, which you did. In the meanwhile, at least from my point of view, the book, the manuscript of the book becomes like wine. Something starts dropping down and something goes up. And you can see that after a few months, just as wine kind of gets better, or at least a lot of things become clearer about it, that after a few months, you start seeing things that you wrote and thought about in a different light than when you were writing that. And in a year, you again start seeing things differently than in the beginning. One thought leads you to another, and then to another, and to another. And the new level, and the new level, and the new level is opening up for you. Because we have some students here, I want to share something from my student days that I still use when I write books. When I was an undergrad at the University of Belgrade studying philosophy, we had to write a lot of papers like you guys do here. And I had a strange experience. If in the course of writing a paper, there was no time and moment when I thought that this is all trash and I should just erase everything and start it from the beginning, it was almost always a mediocre paper. If I had those experiences when I wanted to tear it apart, at that time we were writing with hands or typewriter, it almost never comes out as surprising, interesting, insightful. And I quickly realized that those moments are the moments to cherish, the moments of frustration, because there are only 2 more days left before the paper is due, or there's a deadline approaching, and you wasted basically so many hours in getting this draft, and just when you think it's good and you're almost done, you realize, this is trash. This is trash. I gotta not submit this trash to my professor. I'll go back to my professor, I cannot do it. And something opens, and that realization usually, at least in my case, forced me to a deeper level of understanding, or something that's unusual, interesting, something I didn't see before, something that's not obvious. And it almost always led to a work that is much better. Something like that has to happen with virtually every book that I write. Usually what happens, let's say if I have 4 parts of the book, or 4 major chapters like in this one, usually I get the first 2 right almost in the first writing. Okay? The first 2 chapters of this book are 80% the same that they were after the first draft. Because that's something you think about, you write about, you talk about a lot. And the interesting thing for me is what happens with the second part of the book. That's the one where I have to go and do it again and again, and not necessarily all from scratch, but you just, the manuscript, the book leads you to more and more. It's like you open one door and there's another door in front of you. And you open that door and you realize there's another door that you could not have anticipated at all before you started writing. However many notes you make, however many sketches you make, it's always an adventure. So you can guess the first couple of doors, and then after that, it's really, you will be taken for an adventure, and you have to go wherever it takes you. At least that's my process. And now I know that it's good when I get frustrated, when I get desperate, when I say, what is this? I wasted 6 months. This is nothing. This is trash. Right? I usually have to have at least 2 or 3 of those moments when I just want to throw it away and say, I have no clue what I'm talking about. This is something to be ashamed of, not to be proud of. And then you let a few days or a few nights, you sleep over it, and then you say, oh, but that part is still very good, right? It's just that other part is not good. You start seeing more clearly, and you start taking the things that you think are good from those that are not. Let me go back to Gandhi. What did I see in Gandhi? What did I learn about Gandhi that I didn't know about Gandhi before? What made me write the book? If I want to oversimplify a little bit, I can put it this way. Before I even attempted to write about Gandhi, and I was lecturing about him, teaching my students about him, I could clearly see how different he was, and that most of us and none of us would ever want to be like him. And there was a point when I started understanding just how similar he was to us, and how each one of us could be Gandhi, or something like that, in our own life, in our own way. So first he was standing way up on the pedestal, and all he could do is learn facts of his life and try to understand his teaching and appreciate what he did. And then all of a sudden, you start seeing him almost like going backwards, and you start recognizing a struggling human being. Most of you will know that Gandhi was a very average child. Very average, in every respect. Maybe he was even more shy than an average child. There was nothing to indicate any greatness whatsoever. Then he did something that for most people would be great for their entire life, and that is to go from a poor, small, rural India into London and become a lawyer over there in India, in London. And he could have easily lived with that for the rest of his life, right? Being a lawyer from England and enjoying all the privileges of good life. It just so happened that he got the job to do in South Africa. We're talking about 1880s. There were lots of Indians in South Africa, and they were treated pretty much like African people, black people over there. That is to say, second-hand or third-hand citizens. Some of them were better off financially, but they were all treated by the British like less than human beings. Gandhi wanted to be a good lawyer and apply what he learned in school, but he soon realized that the law doesn't touch the real people. The law does not deal with the real people and their problems. That the real people get lost in courts, in court decisions, and paperwork. And he very quickly, and to his credit, realized that the much better thing to do than to bring people to court is to try to get them out of the court settlement, to get people to talk to each other, without lawyers, just directly speak to each other like human beings. Because in most cases, one side does not understand the grievances of the other. And to the lawyers, you don't hear them, or you hear them in such a packed language that you have no idea what they're talking about. They talk about some abstract things, not you, and what actually happened to you and your neighbor. So Gandhi started getting people out of the court to talk to each other. And he was surprised how easy it was in most cases to get them to forgive each other, to apologize to each other, to find a settlement that involved no jail, no punishment, no policemen, no courts, no handcuffs, nothing of the kind that usually happens. No bitterness, no resentment, all the things that usually follow the judicial procedures in South Africa and everywhere else in the world. But then he also realized that that's not enough, that what he's doing is still a band-aid, still just addressing the surface of things. But there's something for which he didn't have an expression, but the expression was coined by a famous peace activist, Johan Galtung, who wrote over 150 books. So you don't get excited over me writing that books. I'm not joking, literally 150 books or more, and about 800 articles or so. Right? We need to see shrink after all of us who have any ambition to write. Johan Galtung came up with an expression, structural violence. That's the expression we hear these days in news, right? There's violence, and there's much of violence. It's not a direct violence of I punch you, you punch me, and it goes on like that. There's a violence that we create by certain attitudes that we have towards women, towards minorities, and the certain expectations that go with the working place. So we have heard a lot last year, especially if you were women, right, and you want to make a career. There were lots of things that were lots of elements of violence that are built in our way of life, especially our social life, and especially the workplace, that we have to attend to every day in our life. So Gandhi started realizing that violence has deep roots. Not that he for a moment thought that we are violent creatures. He thought that in about 10 actions that any person performs, maybe one of them is violent and 9 is non-violent. And he wondered how people concluded that we are violent creatures if 9 out of 10 things we do is non-violent. So we started going into the roots. And of course, as you all know, we realized that violence should not be deterred by violence, because he said an eye for an eye and the whole world gets blind. He started realizing that one thing that contributes to our world being so violent is greed. Greed. That's never enough. No matter how much you have, more and more. And he had a beautiful saying. Gandhi had a lot of beautiful one-liners that Mother Nature created enough to satisfy our need, but not enough for our greed. And that's why he started preaching simple life. That's why he started preaching living in small communities where people can talk to each other and address each other's needs and notice and pay more attention to each other's feelings, attitudes, rather than the big cities in which we all get lost, in which we are all strangers to each other, even when we live next door to each other for years. But the most important thing that Gandhi noticed is that our civilization is suffering from a horrible shortage of spirituality. Scientifically, technically, we are advanced beyond the wildest imagination of previous generations. cripples. Cripples. And by spirituality, Gandhi did not mean just religion, or organized religion, and definitely not just his own religion, Hinduism. He's very interested in all religions of the world, and like so many great people realize that pretty much all religions in the world have a very similar message, that they all preach the same thing, or near same thing. Gandhi was very impressed by the discernment of the mind, which for him became like part of him, how frequently he read it during his morning prayers or evening prayers in his ashram. But he also read portions of the Quran, the Upanishads, the Vedas. He wanted to know the spirituality in every form, even when it's not directly related to the Holy Scriptures. The problem of violence for Gandhi became the problem of development what we call the soul force. The soul force. It became the problem of seeing people, not just in their immediate actions, that are easily visible and noticeable, but people as a whole. People with their fears, people with their insecurities, people with their despairs. Oftentimes you realize the victimizers are those who will victimize themselves, frequently children. And that before we strike back, or maybe before we say anything else, it's important to look at the eyes and the soul of a human being whose behavior is less than human being to you. And before you make a judgment, try to see what's in those eyes. Fear, insecurity, lostness, loneliness. Before you judge, I'm going to read to you just one sentence of Gandhi. This is the sentence that he actually ever wrote down. He said it. And the occasion was the following one. In 1931, the British realized that they were losing grip over India. So they invited the representatives of several leading political groups and ethnic and religious groups in India to come to London for the famous Round Table Conference. It was a disaster. But Gandhi was able to meet with a lot of people. It's mostly not politicians who wanted to see them, but workers, especially the textile workers, who were losing their jobs because the labor in India was so cheap. Why pay the workers? The same problem we have in this country for the last 50 years. Why pay the workers here with the benefits and so on when you can have cheap labor in different parts of the world like India and Philippines and so on. So Gandhi went to see those workers, talk to them. Gandhi, as a matter of fact, wanted to talk to anybody who had time to talk to them. He was as approachable as very few human beings have been ever. And he is as recognizable as very few human beings have ever been. Everybody, even a child, could recognize Gandhi, especially at that stage in his life when he was old and he had his uniquely Indian clothing with a long stick to help him while he's walking, with his near bald hair and big glasses and a toothless mouth that was always smiling. So during these several months that he spent in England for the peace conference, that dragged on and on and on. You know how politicians are good about talking without ever coming even closer to resolving anything, but they talk. Gandhi was approached by a few American journalists who worked for the CBS. That was before the TVs, right? I remember, that's 1931, but there was a radio at that time. And they approached Gandhi and asked him if he would give a little speech for the American audience. That he was well known in America, that a lot of people were interested in him, but people never heard his voice. And that he would do a live broadcast without any preparation. And Gandhi said, of course, why not? Just give me 2 minutes to compose myself. And he actually spoke about God and religion. And I'm not going to read to you the whole speech. You can find it on YouTube. It's still there. Just Google Gandhi, CBS, 1931, and you'll get the speech. It's about 6 minutes, 7 minutes. It's a very interesting speech with Gandhi's voice being recorded live without any preparation, without any notes. It's a remarkable speech, actually. One sentence in that speech, in that radio address, is this: you have to be like God to be fully human. You have to be like God to be fully human. It's a remarkable sentence. I don't think anybody ever said even close to it. You have to be like God to be fully human. What could he possibly have in mind? We never want to be like God. But we can try. We made an image of God. We should try as much as we can. Here's what I think Gandhi wanted to say. To be human, not fully, just human, like we are, is to be preoccupied with your self-interest. When do you eat? Do you have time for that? Are you making enough money? When is that payment due? When's the next appointment? And when you have to go and see a doctor? All these things. That's the center of our life. And when we're subject to violence, our first reaction is that our egos are hurt. Somebody has violated my privacy, my self-interest, and so on. Right? It's the perfectly normal reaction that all of us have. When we want to elevate it a little bit or make it a little bit more sophisticated, we say it in an impersonal manner. Justice is violated and justice has to be restored. Okay? If not, by me striking the person directly, then through courts and police force and all of those things. And so it goes. Right? Revenge in one form or another. I'll speak here like Gandhi was a Christian, which he partially was in his soul. Gandhi was fascinated by passages in the Bible where God seemed to shine equally on the good ones and the wicked ones. And he seemed to send rain to the good people and to the bad people without discrimination. What amazed him, Gandhi, was that the Christian God could forgive. So much so that there's no offense that God cannot forgive. If there's a genuine repentance, if there's an attempt, if there's a feeling of remorse, if there's an attempt to be better in the future and learn something from our mistakes. So what Gandhi said, be more like God in order to be more of a human being. What he meant to say, I take it, is something like this. As a human being, as an ordinary self-interested human being, you're naturally obsessed with good and evil and justice and how they are distributed and so on and so forth. And that's not what God is concerned with. God is concerned with all of his children. And God knows that every one of his children has moments of despair, insecurity, failures. That every one of his children has a lot to be regretful about, has done a lot of things that he or she hopefully will not do again and hopes never to do again. And so God can send rain and sun on all of his children and forget all of them because they're all so imperfect. They're all so fallible. And they all have a sense of guilt. And they can all be touched by the tragedy that befalls human beings all too often. Sometimes I tell my students that among the times in my life when I felt most like a human being was after September 11th. They're too young to remember. But that was the time when we who were adults, who were aware of the tragedy that happened, were so close to each other, so sensitive to each other. We had time for each other. We wanted to share that pain, which we normally don't even think about. We hide it deep inside and pretend everything's normal. Put a nice mask, presentable on our face, and it's business as usual. I think that's what Gandhi had in mind. That not to divide people too quickly and too easily into victims and victimizers. But to see our pain, to see our frustration, to see our attempts fail and those successful, to become better than we are. Just to become better than we are. We're never going to be God. We're never going to be perfect. But there's this attempt to understand more, to be sensitive more. And this unceasing desire and effort to become better human beings than we already are. I think when I realized that, or when I thought I realized that that's what Gandhi was after, I felt, or Gandhi made me feel, that maybe I'm ready to convey the message about his life and work to the rest of the world, even those who knew a lot about Gandhi have not heard. And that's an important message to convey. Just instead of thinking of revenge, instead of thinking about how much violence there is in this world, try to think about how to become just a little bit better human being than we were yesterday. And each next day have the same goal in mind. And God will not only be able to send sunshine and rain on us, but would smile a little bit more at his children. I think that's why I wrote this book, to say that. To make us see that even in failing, there's a good side in us. And that side has a need to grow, always. And that side has a room to grow. And that what pulls us up most of the time, what makes us grow as human beings, is not a concern about money, or the next meal, or the next visit to a doctor, and whether we're taking those pills at the prescribed time and prescribed doses. But that attempt to let the soul grow and show a little bit more in the world. That's my answer to the question why I wrote the book on Gandhi. Thank you for your attention. I would love to hear some of your questions and comments if you have any. Please.
In the writing book, I don't know if this is your experience, the fear, for example, you handed first drafts to 6 of your friends, how does that, and then, you know, the criticism back and...
No fear.
No fear.
No fear.
Were you always that way, or...?
Always. More concerned than fear, but not what they're going to say. More, am I going to hear their criticism and their constructive suggestions well enough and not allow my ego to be offended when they say, this part is crap, change it. I not get offended by it, but try to see, okay, but what do you think I should say there, or how would you imagine to hear the constructive parts rather than the negative part. Not afraid of criticism. I'm afraid of not hearing the constructive part and not acting on that. That's there's fear. That's fear. I always try, honestly, when I write, and that's also the attitude that I remember from my college days, to be my own worst critic, to be sharper in my criticism than anybody, the kind people like Paul can ever be. So seriously, I always, I try, so the draft is finished, I get 5 or 6 comments from different people, but I also continue to make my own comments. And by the time, let's say 3 months later or 6 months later, depends on when I have a stretch of time to dedicate it to the book, I would have 10 times more comments than what these people gave me, and 10 times more critical comments than they gave me. And our revision is so long and so painful because no stone is left unturned. It starts with the title, it starts with the main thesis, it starts with how clearly it's presented, it starts with how clearly it's defended, how well it's defended. No stone is unturned. That's my editing of my manuscript. No stone, nothing that I said, however pleasing it may sound or be, is not open for revision. So the comments of others are more guidelines and suggestions and kind of a thermometer of how others are reacting to me. I'm always the sharpest critic, and I'm always going to raise the comments that they would not see or not specifically point out, or sometimes they do have good comments, but I would deepen it and try to go much deeper into their comments and see how far I can take it. So no fear, really. Fear is totally wrong. Full confidence, that open-mindedness. Every time I write anything, I give it everything I have. If that's not good enough, it's not good enough. I just did. Usually people seem to think there is something there, it's worth publishing it. So I never had a manuscript that was not published. Right? It's not easy to find a publisher, and I struggle with it, and I dread that part of finding a publisher. That's really the most frustrating part. I would much rather write another book than look for a publisher. Seriously. You just give it all you have. You just, this is you, this is the best. If you feel this is the best you can give, if others think it's not good enough, it's not good enough. But no more fear. Yes?
So what was the broader academic response after the book was finally published?
Gandhi?
Yes.
You see, to give you a preface before I answer it, this is something that people who do peace studies would first look at or be interested in. Unfortunately, our peace studies have been dominated by the political science people. Okay? Political science people, and they measure everything through the eyes of politics. And to tell them that Gandhi was a spiritual being and that his message is spiritual, they are deaf. They either think that the message is irrelevant or they don't hear it. There was a brilliant man who died, if I'm not wrong, Jim Sharp, who died recently, right, Paul? Yeah. Who lived here in Boston and worked here in Boston, and who dedicated many, many years of his life to Gandhi. And he created an opus on Gandhi. I mean, really an opus, several books. But he tried to translate what Gandhi did into about 200 rules of political activism. And this is very, very important work, and it was used in a number of so-called peaceful revolutions from Serbia to the Arab Spring. Basically, Gene Sharp was translated into these languages, and young, especially students, young men and women, were educated in how to implement this political Gandhi for our time. As much as I admire his work, I think he just missed Gandhi. Gandhi's name is there, and his actions, but the spirit of it is totally lost. And what I think you can see now in Serbia and in a number of these countries along the Mediterranean where there was this peaceful revolution in Ukraine is that these changes are just cosmetic changes. They remove whoever's in power, and they bring new people who are as bad or worse than those that were replaced by them. And America gets what it wants, or the West gets what it wants, but essentially the situation gets worse. So I have two kinds of reactions. The political science people just ignore it. They don't want to read it. The moment they see what the book is about, which is pretty clear on Amazon.com, and I try to make it very, very clear who the audience, intended audience for the book is, or if they are people who appreciate spirituality and see that the change that we need in this world is not political change, but the spiritual change, they usually very favorably accept the book and praise this and try to spread the word. But that's a vast minority, especially in the academia. So I can't say that I got as many comments or reviews as I wanted to, but I was pretty happy with those that I did get. It's a mixed blessing. The two kind of writers, I think. One kind of writers that are very aware of the audience to which they write, and they write for a very specific audience. And sometimes their publishers want them to write for a very specific audience, whether it's the college, college students, or educated academia, or professionals, and so on. I have the opposite approach. I don't write for any particular audience. I don't have the audience in mind at all. I write it for anybody who may be interested. They can come from different professions and different life experiences in different parts of the world. And there's sometimes I have a hard time trying to see what connects them. But the books speak to them in some level that I can't always quite put my finger on or understand. But somehow the book reaches them. I think the main principle that I have in my writing is to bring the mind and the heart together. If they're not together, then the book is bad. It can be smart, but it can be just bad, pointless, from my point of view. So the heart and the mind have to work together, have to be balanced together. And I think that passion is always there, and that concern, human concern, is always there. And that's not how academic books are written. That's considered a disadvantage in the academic publishing. So I usually get the very quick rejection from the academic presses because it's not professional enough, or detached enough, or objective enough. But that doesn't bother me very much, really, because I think that the books that don't have the whole personality, that don't reflect the whole personality of the life experience of the authors, are just, for the most part, useless books. So I don't want to waste my time on them, just like they don't want certain people who just want a smart book. I don't want to waste their time on one book. And there's no offense, it's just the priorities. You have to have priorities in life. I gave up the idea of trying to please everybody a long time ago, thank God. So I don't try to please anybody. I just do what I think is the best I can do in writing or other forms of behavior. And however people react to it, that's up to them, really.
Has the book been distributed in India, and what kind of reception have you heard in there?
The book has been distributed in India, but there's zero reaction. India has a very peculiar attitude toward Gandhi. On every banknote in India, there's a picture of Gandhi. Any domination, right, from this paper, any city in India, any city would have a statue of Gandhi. Okay? Everywhere you go, there are thousands of people who would call him Gandhiji, the term of endearment, and who would say, oh, he was a great man, or he was a saint. But that's about everything they are capable of telling you about Gandhi. The level of ignorance about Gandhi is appalling. I'm just giving you one example to illustrate that. Just a month ago, I was in India for a major peace conference, which took place between the 27th and the 29th of January. So the conference ended one day before the anniversary, the 70th anniversary of Gandhi's death. So I assume, because it's a peace conference, that it has to do something with the anniversary of Gandhi's death. Nobody mentioned Gandhi, and nobody remembered that a day after the conference is over, it's the anniversary of Gandhi's death. And a lot of people, virtually everybody who was there, were university professors and people who were involved in peace activism. And then Gandhi was barely mentioned. I was so pissed off that I scrapped my paper that I prepared for the conference. In India, they ask you to send a paper, not just an abstract, but the paper usually 2 months in advance, and they publish them or something. And then you go to conference to read this paper, like they cannot read it without you. Just like our PowerPoint presentation, right? Like you cannot read it by yourself, so you have a speaker who's reading it for you, right? It's unbelievable smart. What an advancement in teaching we have, right? When I saw what's going on at the conference, I basically gave them a speech about their disrespect of Gandhi and about their disrespect of their own history and how ashamed they should be. And that was the talk that I gave at this conference, right? Just went there and didn't stop talking until I think I bumped everybody in the audience. And a lot of people came to thank me later on, and they were ashamed. Some people just turned their heads and probably walked away or tried to forget it as soon as it was over and wondered what the hell was that, right? Because it was not in the program, and everybody has this booklet with a picture of the speaker and the abstract, and at the back of it the whole paper, and what was that? And where did that come from? Right? But it spoke from the heart. Gandhi is virtually unknown in India. He's a legend, he's a saint, but the living Gandhi, the Gandhi who's trying to make the difference, is forgotten. I mean, he would be turning in a grave to know what's happening in India, and what was happening right after, even at the end of his life and immediately after he died. He would be turning in a grave. That's not the India he was living. Gandhi was far more concerned about freeing India from its century-old prejudices than to free them against the British. He thought that's an easy part, to get the British out of India. The difficult part is to deal with the untouchability, to deal with the lack of sanitation, right? To deal with the position of women, right? To deal with the religious intolerance, especially between Hindus and Muslims. Those are the real problem of India. The pollution, the environmental catastrophe, those are the real problems in India. Gandhi wanted to change those far more than, that's the structural violence that I was talking about earlier. Gandhi thought that getting rid of the British, that's easy. By the way, the British pretty much walked out on their own. The government was bankrupt. They lost one colony after the other. It was a different time and age. They left India more than the Indians forced them to leave India. right? But Gandhi's agenda was the things that I mentioned. First of all, the untouchability. What do we do with this shame when some human beings are treated like they're not human beings? That's what Gandhi was fighting against. That was the real violence that was in Gandhi's eyes. So India's very strange, very peculiar. And Gandhi's position in India is most peculiar. I've never seen in any country like that kind of neglect of one of its greatest sons as it's in India. But nothing surprises me about India. Nothing surprises me about India anymore. I've been there plenty of times and hope to go more. And just India.
I know you've been very impressed with the Jains, and given your message, I would think the Jains would be more open to your interpretations than most. So what about them?
They are, and I spent a lot of time, I lived with them in India, I was in constant communication. As you know, the book that I edited to which you participated, Nonviolence as a Way of Life, a huge tome of 50 papers, 700 something pages, was inspired by the Jains. But they kind of experienced Gandhi as a competition. That he stole their idea of nonviolence and kind of turned it into something, and everybody in the world knows about Gandhi, but nobody knows about Jains. Jains are very small religious groups, one of the smallest religious groups in the world, especially when you think about how large the Indian population is. There are less than 10 million of them in India. There are close to 1.5 million in this country, including Boston, but especially LA and California. Their leader, somebody who they celebrate as the religious founder, was Mahavir, or Lord Mahavira, as they called him, who lived roughly at the same time as the Buddha. And this is the time, and the Jains kind of emerged for the same reason that Buddhism emerged, of the corruption of the Brahmin caste, the corruption of the leading people who had the power and education and who kept everybody else in ignorance about the Vedas and the Upanishads. So the Buddha and the Jains kind of wanted to open up religion and spirituality for everybody. So it didn't matter what caste you're coming from, right? That's why the Buddhist robes those are the robes that are being the color of these Buddhist robes. That's the color that prisoners or dead people would wear in India, usually prisoners, right? So this is an anti-caste message. And the same thing with the Jains. The Jains dress all in white, which is the color of mourning. And when you're mourning, everybody's dressed in white, and it doesn't matter what your caste is. So it's the reaction. The Jains emerged as a reaction to the corrupted Hindu tradition, to the Brahmin tradition. And they're a small group. There are many sects within Jainism, but they all agree on one thing. Non-violence is the first principle of life. And absolutely the first principle of life. They are vegetarians, they are vegans, they're very strict about their way of life, what they eat. Sometimes people, you may have seen caricatures of them. You may see a Jain person with a little sweep broom walking in front of him so not to step on any insect or on any living being. And they also wear a mask so they don't get bacteria into their mouth and by mistake kill a human life. They don't go anywhere out after the sunset. They don't go out before the sun rises fully, before it's fully light. They do these kind of things that's very strange to most of us. They never engage in any profession that involves killing of any kind. But they're kind people. They're incredible people. They're very dedicated. They're very pious. They pray. They meditate. The lay people, of course, they have their own priest, monks. My wife and I lived with them at one university that was Jain, and then I went to live there more, to learn more. They're incredible people. Their spirituality is so demanding, every day. But they are a minority, and most people in India make fun of them and think of them as very shrewd businessmen, as people who kind of in a way that people in Europe stereotype Jews for centuries. You know, they seem to be the lowest of the low, and yet they have more money than anybody else, right? And because they have more money, they have power, and so on. But my experience with the Jains, even my Indian friends, very educated, think extremely lowly of them and would want them wild and waste any kind with the Jains. But my experience with them, that I could just hope to be like them, being more sensitive to the living beings as Jains are. For instance, they would never pick a vegetable or get the vegetable from the ground that which they have to kill in order to eat. So they can eat what has leaves, but the roots are still there, alive, right? They can never pick a fruit from a tree before the fruit is ripe and before it falls down to the ground. So they would not involve any kind of killing, not a mosquito, not any kind of creature. They would not kill. Everything has the right to live. Complete reverence for life, plus double it with the Indian theory of reincarnation. Virtually all of us have lived endless reincarnations, and virtually all of us have been animals and plants in previous lives. And what we need is not more killing, but more reverence and more respect for each other. So it's a tremendous religion, very strange. People in the South, there's a group of Jains male in the South who go completely naked. They have no possession of any kind, no clothes, not even a begging bowl. For a begging bowl, they use their hands. So whatever food you give them in their hands, that's what they're going to eat, and they eat once a day. And whatever they get, if they don't get any food for that day, they're simply not going to eat. And that's no fuss and no problem whatsoever. So I had tremendous experiences with them. They taught me a lot. I was admiring them, still do. I'm still in touch with some Jains here in the United States. And I always feel like I'm among friends when I go back to India and visit the Jains.
I think we have time for one last question.
Okay? Go for it, Sarah. Okay.
I have another one, if nobody else.
There's one behind you.
Have you done any field work or anything, and how does your experience in India connect to your motivations for writing about Gandhi as well as individual experiences? I know you mentioned James and one, but I feel like interpersonal interactions must have also sparked.
I try to see as much real life as possible. You know, we as professors, and especially if you're in Fulbright, you're sheltered and privileged in so many ways, and oftentimes you can spend a lot of time at a certain place and not see what real people, what real life is, and what real experience is. I'll actually tell you about one experience, something that happened to me the first time I went to India. So it was 2007. I was at the conference that was called Gandhi is Back, which kind of puzzled me because I didn't know where Gandhi went to come back, but that was the title of the conference. At this conference, I was the only foreigner, surprisingly, of 80 speakers, and there was this young woman who had a master's degree at and was teaching at some Indian university, who I thought gave a remarkable paper, and I really praised it, even though everybody else in the audience seemed to have thought that it's a bad paper, or they didn't like it, or whatever, but I tried to encourage her. And so she came a day later, after her paper and after her first conversation, to ask me if I would be willing to talk to her about how to come to the United States and study here and get a PhD, right? And she kind of understood from my bio that that's what happened to me, and that maybe a good person to know some of that. And I said, oh sure, I'd be delighted to talk to you about that. And then she came, a day later she came, okay, can we do it after the conference? My sister and her husband live in this town in Jaipur in Rajasthan, and we would like to invite you over for at my sister's home for dinner, so we can talk at leisure over there. And I said, oh, delightful, that's even better, right, than to be in a hotel or at the university campus and so on. I want to see how they live. Okay, so they took me with a rickshaw. They paid this rickshaw for me, and I went there, and there was a little house. I don't know if you can call it a house, more like a shed. There was husband and wife and 2 sons. His brother lived on the other side of the shed. There was basically one room for the 4-member family. There was a dirt floor, nothing on the floor. You know, in India they don't have beds. They roll these mats and then they roll them again, so that you don't need much of furniture. They had one tiny little table and 2 chairs, 2 plastic chairs, very cheap. That's all they had in this apartment. So fortunately, the last day of the conference, I don't know exactly how that happened, I got a chess set as a gift. Somebody learned that I'm a chess master and challenged me to play chess, and then they gave me this chess set as a gift. And I was thinking what to do with it, because my wife is also a chess master, and we have at least 15 chess sets at home. So should I bring another chess set just because it's from India, right? But fortunately, this young couple had 2 little boys. Like one was 7, one was maybe 5. So I taught them how to play chess, and I left that chess set with them over there. Everybody happy, right? So it was time for dinner. Okay? I was not prepared for this. It was time for dinner, and the dinner was served to the husband of that woman and myself. Okay? And we were sitting on these 2 chairs. We shared this little table, or they basically take a plate. They don't really need much of a table. And the 2 women, the 2 sisters, were sitting in front of us, and the children were sitting in their laps, and they were watching us eat. Okay? As you can imagine, I was very uncomfortable. Why are we not eating at the same time? And they said, but they cannot eat because they don't know how much food would be left after us. Okay? So can you imagine you're eating, you're in somebody's house in a foreign country, you barely know the people, and there are these 400 mouths watching every bite that you take. Okay, I understand I'm a guest of honor, and I would offend them if I don't eat, right? And my recollection, the food was quite tasty and decent, and everything was fine with the food, but you have to overcome this, I don't know, sense of guilt or whatever, right? That you're eating and somebody's watching you eat and waiting to see if anybody would be left after you. And interestingly enough, after the 2 of us, the 2 women, 2 adults ate, and then the children the last. That part I couldn't quite get. I mean, I would expect the reverse, but that's what it was. So I had experiences like that. So I spent about 6 hours. Let me just tell you what they did at the very end. Okay, it was getting very late. It must have been close to midnight already. But Indians eat very late, so it was not unusual for them, right? They wouldn't eat before 9 or 10 or so. It's normal. So it was definitely midnight or so. And so the question was, they had no vehicle, nothing to transport me back to my hotel. So they called a rickshaw driver, and they told the rickshaw driver where to take me, and I had no phone at that time. And they asked the rickshaw driver how much money would that cost. And then they gave me the money, okay, not to the rickshaw driver. They said, when you go to your hotel, the rickshaw driver will call our number, and then he will put you on the phone so that we hear, that we are sure that you deliver to your hotel, and that you're safe and that everything's fine. And then when we hear that, then we say, okay, now you can pay him, then you pay him. They did not even want me to pay. For me, there was no money whatsoever. For them, it was probably a considerable amount, but I was their guest, and I would have offended them if I paid. So they invited me, they brought me, and they had to make sure that I was escorted back safely. Experiences like that made me go back to India. Was it dirty? Yeah, of course it was dirty, right? What do you expect, right? It was a dirt floor that was sitting on. Of course they sweep it every day, but you can still imagine how it, were the dishes from which we were eating super clean? No. Were they washed? They were probably washed with water before we used them, but that's their standard. And so you either accept that, or you say, I'm going back to my whatever star hotel and I'm going to eat there. And you miss that kind of experience with people, sharing their food, eating with fingers, right? So you got to know that India to see what Gandhi was fighting for and what he was fighting against, rather than who's in government and who's the president and how large is the army and what kind of weapons they have. To him, those were very secondary issues. And yet those are the issues that we, especially in politics, make to be the primary and only issues to talk about. Again, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. There is food back there, drinks and things like that. I do want to thank you for giving this wonderful presentation. Our next Author on the Hill talk is on Wednesday, March 21st. So I encourage all of you, if you've enjoyed this talk, I know you'll enjoy that one as well.
And bring your friends.
And bring your friends. Tell your colleagues and your classmates. These are all wonderful, and I know that this was a great experience for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.